Welcome again, everyone. This webinar is brought to you by the Ohio Employee-Owned Network, part of the Ohio Employee Ownership Center at Kent State University in Kent, Ohio. We're a nonprofit training and outreach organization located on the campus of Kent State, and we focus on employee-owned companies. Today we have Jack Veale, President of PTCFO, and our presentation today is Board Evolution, how boards of directors help ESOPs and closely held family-owned businesses. Jack, take it away.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for attending. The program today is going to cover the evolutions of a business and how boards evolve with those businesses. In addition, we're going to go through typical board behaviors, or what I call styles or stages, as they evolve into into different levels. So just so you know, just a little pitch about who we are. We started off as a part-time CFO and converted to professionalize the corporate family organization. We've established a number of websites, as you can see on this first page, and the goal for us is to get more ESOPs into the world. And so we've got ESOP Marketplace and ESOP Directors, and their ESOP Directors is about certifying directors on 3 levels: as a fiduciary, as a director, and if you have a trustee, you are a trustee as well. We have that certification as well. That's coming out in 2013. Anyways, so let's get started. We're going to work this through the buttons here, and the next screen says, what is governance? And it's the act of governing. If you go grab a dictionary, it says to control the action and behaviors of others. And the dictionary also will tell you that a director is a member of the board of persons who control and govern the affairs of an institution or company, one who controls or supervises. I'm reading this off, ladies and gentlemen, so that the video or the recorder can have those words as well. Ethics, the study of ethic, a principle of right and good conduct, a set of moral values. One of the things that's asked by boards many times is to set the tone or the ethic of what the values of the company should be. So that's a board, not a trustee or an employee issue. It's a board issue. The next step, this is the ESOP life cycle. And then actually it's a business life cycle. But it's the thing that happens in a business life cycle is that you start at the early stages in the bottom left-hand corner, where you're courting an idea, and then when you create an infant, it's because you now have that idea become a real business. And then it goes into the go-go stage. If it's lucky enough to get in the go-go stages, what happens now is that all the ideas that you had about starting the business now come back because you were able to survive with the need of sales. If you don't get enough sales or you lose commitment, then you have what they call infant mortality. At the go-go stage, you're coming back in a roar with more products, more services, and it's a really fun place to be. And most of the ESOP companies that I've run into are either go-go's, adolescents, or prime. And what happens there in go-go is they got a lot of ideas. The founder's ready to. The founder did not get into the founder families trap where they said, it's my way or the highway. Well, in some cases they do, but it's more of a collaborative, and they do work their way through in the adolescent stages where they bring in CFOs because they got to get control over this growth. The banks are saying, hey, you're running up a lot of inventory and you're eating up a lot of cash. Let's get this thing going. And then at prime, you're growing the company profitably. And so I see a lot of ESOP companies that are in prime. But when you get to prime, then you have the challenge of staying there because it's a slippery slope. So either you fall back to adolescence and the conflicts that go on in adolescence, and if you've ever raised teenagers, you know what an adolescent is. It's somebody who says, no, I don't want to do it that way. And at the stable side, you're saying, well, we've been successful. We don't need to change anymore. We're doing it just fine, thank you. And what happens along the way is that as you slide into the aging side of this life cycle is that arrogance comes in, and aristocracy, early bureaucracy. These behaviors are when people, it's not what happened, is who did it. And so when you get to the end of death, people show up for work, but they don't know why they're there. They don't know what they're doing. They're just doing their job and leaving, and there's no care. Now, I say all that quickly because when you go to the boards, whatever level the company's in, there's a proper board level to be at. And if you start at the go-go stages, the board of a go-go is going to be totally different from a board of prime or of an infant. So let's talk about the next stage, the governing board types. You don't have a board. It's me. I'm the CEO. You guys all work for me. And, you know, you're all working under my divisions, and you're all managing well. Or then we bring in maybe we have an operating board where it says, geez, you know, I have you guys are my key managers, and, you know, we're the board. But you're not going to argue with me because I'll fire you. At least that's the implied concern. Or my family is, you know, I have my wife. In order to incorporate the business, I had to have my wife on the board because that was required. And maybe I had my kids. But in the meantime, in ESOP, I've seen a number of ESOPs where mom and kids are on the board of an ESOP. And so now, then you have this passive board. No, a passive board could be, geez, I invited a couple of my friends to come on the board as well as my family. But they're not going to argue with me either, but I'm learning to get through that stage. And then there's the stage that this is where it gets kind of interesting, because the certifying board is now I've brought in a lot more independent people. So they're now trying to grapple with me, and so they're trying to make sure that, they're trying to make sure that they're following a process. And then what usually happens is at this certifying stage is that there's a transition out. The family leaves, or they don't get as important as the independent directors, which then leads to an engaged board. Because independent directors have a tendency to be pushing the CEO, saying, well, geez, you should be doing it this way. Well, I've done this before. It doesn't work. Well, try it again. I mean, you couldn't argue with your boss, but I can as an independent director. Then there's an intervening board, which means that in the event of the CEO's death, the board steps in and deals with crisis. So one of the things I would like you to think about is, which board are you? You know, which one do you think you are at right now? I think if you're sitting there next to each other, I think you all should write down on a piece of paper what you think your board you're at right now. Just write it on a piece of paper for later on. I'll take a second to give you time to write it down on a piece of paper.
In fact, maybe we could just pause and ask if any one of our listeners can relate to what you've just said and have any comments. I think most of the companies that are in attendance today have evolved to an ESOP through a closely held business and probably gone through some of those stages.
Or still are.
Still are.
Or still are. All right, so I'm going to continue on. If you work with advisory boards, one of the best ways to organize to bring in independent directors is to create an advisory board. And the wonderful thing about advisory boards is that there's no vote. It's a matter of getting used to the concept of having people tell you what to do. And they're not actually telling you what to do. They're actually trying to advise management and the CEO on a best approach, not the right approach. And so what happens along the way is we usually cover, when we have a strong CEO or owner, we ask them to set up an advisory board so they can get used to it. And in the event of their passing, these guys can kick in and be the directors they need to be with whoever's there now. So sometimes we bring family and friends in just to get them used to it. Sometimes we'll add a couple of outsiders, depending on how comfortable they are with that. But the goal is to build board engagement. And then over time, management below is invited to those meetings. And one of the things that happens along the way is to get the CEO comfortable with these people who, in a sense, are his boss or her boss. And over time, the board and management improves so that there is a relationship that is fostered in the event of his passing or her passing. And then what will happen is that at some point there may be an integration that says, geez, you know, I'm very comfortable with Pete Newby or Mary Newby, and I think it's time that we add her to the board. When in that transition from advisory to an engaged board, there's the early transition, and that is when the family or management steps away because it's time to bring in the independent directors. And those independent directors will be starting to focusing on governing processes such as committees, charters, things like that. You know, structure and process to help you know, create the right board tone and system. And the other part of it is that's important is that you have is that there's an agreement of determining the shareholder value. What is it that you're looking to do with these board members? Board members on their side is they're there stiff, not touch. You know, what boards are there for is to set the tone, work with management to make sure they're performing, and let them do it. Some of the best boards I've ever formed have come from when the CEO was willing to let go and let the board help management improve. And some of the ones that have been really kind of cool is that the CEO works with the board to help do that. And it depends on the age of the person, you know, and what are their goals. The goals of a 75-year-old CEO that's been doing this for 40 years is going to be totally different from a 55-year-old who's been at it for 10. Totally different mindsets. So it's kind of interesting. The one thing about an early transition is at some point the outside directors evolve to a majority and that they meet separately without management or the CEO so they can talk with one another. It is kind of an interesting dynamic when that happens. And so let's go to the next slide. In the maturing stages, there's a setting of goals, mission, management development, performance standards. Those kinds of metrics are well understood. The committees are performing as they're needed. The directors represent the shareholders, and so the shareholders are not just the owner, who may be a majority, but it also includes the ESOP people. And so the beneficiaries of the ESOP are equally measured or equally communicated with. The interesting part about a CEO reports to the board and can be fired, that is true. That is a different dynamic than, you know, if you started the business and you're not going to get fired because you still own the company. But as soon as you give up ownership, then there's an exposure here. And boards don't go out and just fire people. That's not what they want to do. That's the last thing they ever want to do on a board. If you talk to any independent director, they have no interest in firing the CEO or management. What they want to do is get the management team to grow the company, because that's what excites them to be on the board, is to help companies grow. They actually like it because they don't have to do the day-to-day stuff anymore. They let you do it. And so directors by themselves are the best directors are collegial, engaged, and proactive. I mean, so I can name a number of them, but the thing that's so cool about them is that they engage. You know, they participate. They don't just sit back. In the aging stages, this is a stage where compliance comes in. The passive behaviors. You know, you look at a stage where people are passive. That's actually an aging condition, not a growing condition. And so a compliance stage means that you know, don't rock the boat. You know, we've been successful. You know, don't challenge me. You know, remember in the life cycle, that's all up in the aging cycle. Committees focus on compliance, not risk. And what that means is that, you know, they're there to do a thing, but they're not actually stretching the company. One of the funny parts about a succession is that the founder was the one that was running at 85, 95 miles an hour on a racetrack. And people are saying, slow down, we've got to control this thing, we'll get in a crash. So the board was there to make sure that the owner didn't crash the car. But as they evolved to a new successor, that successor was always there not running at 90 miles an hour. He was running at 65. How do you get them? How do you get an organization that's lost an 85 mile an hour driver to somebody who's never driven 95 before? It's kind of scary, because now it's not just a VW, it's a Porsche, and that's a much more expensive car. So taking and pushing the car to the limits is where ESOPs have to go, and not crash the car. So these other items have to do with how the board behaves, whether the CEO controls the board or the directors are loyal or indulgent. And I've seen directors show up just because they need the paycheck. And whether it be Aunt Louise or my best buddy John, that's the deal. And the directors that really want to make an impact are leaving because they don't want to be a part of this anymore. They have a fiduciary responsibility. Which then leads back to the life cycle again. And what I want you to see is that an operating board, which is a board that manages the activities, is usually at the infant go-go stages. And the typical operating board is like, I'm the CEO and you guys are my division managers, and we meet and we operate the company. So we're actually acting like a board, but it's really me, and it's really you just making sure we do the work. And an engaged board happens in adolescent and prime because you've gone to a board that now says, hey, let's deal with not only the CEO but with management, because there's a lot of growth issues. And then it's stable. Then you get this compliant that starts at stable, and it's either compliant or passive. And then at the end, you can see that at near bureaucracy that it's an intervening board, which means you're in a crisis, the things aren't going well, the company's not making money. One of the characteristics of a growing and aging company is in the growing side of the go-go, adolescent, and prime, you grow companies by improving sales and profits through new products and services. On the right-hand side, the way you increase sales and profits is by raising prices, because you've lost your ability to create new products and services. And so part of the challenge you have when an intervening board is, what do you do about fixing the problem? So on the left-hand side, if I were to be a consultant to come in, I'd be a consultant. On the right-hand side, I'd be an insultant, because I'd be insulting everybody to get back to the go-go adolescent stages that they used to know and work in. So that's how the boards evolve in the business life cycle. Now, one of the challenges you have, and this is the next stage. Let me see. We'll go to the next screen. The founders, one of the ESOP board challenges, the founder's risk tolerance is not replaced by the new management, which is back to the Porsche discussion of driving a car at night. You were, every time you bought a new car or increased the car's value, it got more expensive, but then there was risks to running. You could always replace a VW for another 20 grand, but a Porsche costs 120 grand. So now it's, what do we do? And some management teams don't know what to do. They think they know what to do, but they've never actually taken the risks, or there's such an implied environment that now that we got it, we can do it our way. And so one of the things that happens along the way is that sometimes the risks don't work. In most cases that I've been running into, it's the founder retains control after the personal guarantees disappear. And so the struggle is within the organization is, hey, we own the company now. How come you're still controlling it? And boards have if I'm working for you, the difficulty there is politically is big. There's a lot of issues there that would imply that people making changes to the status quo is pretty low. The risks are too high. Another thing with ESOP boards that I've seen is too many inside directors and low turnover. And an inside director could be a current employee or former employee or a right-hand person. So if you used to work for me but you're retired and you're still on my board, that it's not. You're not going to get the changes that needed to survive the next generation of issues. If the current management team can't grow the business, what do you do? What do you do if you're not growing anymore? I have an ESOP company, and I know of an ESOP company in Iowa that has just hired another 100 new employees. 100. They're growing unbelievable. I have another company in Kansas. They've hired another 50. But I also have a company in California that has gone from hundreds of employees to 35. And I have another one that's gone from 200 employees to less than 70. And in all 4 cases, the founder is still there. So it is kind of an interesting, how each, it's all over the map. Another thing that's kind of an interesting thing that I've been watching over the last 12 months is that the lawyers are really busy right now. They're doing a number of transactions on mergers and acquisition, and a number of ESOP companies are being bought out at high multiples. If you were worth $100 a share on your ESOP, they're selling for $500 to $1,000 a share. And so, as a board, do you want to be acquired? Do you want to, one of the things that, the founder said was, I sold this to the employees because I want them to retain their jobs, and I want them to work, be independent and not be acquired by somebody, so that they can keep their jobs. Because I'll show up in the, I show up at the grocery store. I want to make sure you're happy. Well, what happens along the way is some of these guys get these big offers. What do you do as a board member when you get an offer for $1,000 and it's $100? You almost have to. You can't say no, because as a fiduciary, the trustee has to say, is it to the benefit of the beneficiaries to get 10 times the value? Reflexite, which was an ESOP company out of Connecticut, they just sold, I think it was last year or the year before, to a European company for incredible multiples. So the lawyers right now are busy dealing with a lot of buy-sells, and the number of ESOPs are dropping in the United States because of that. Some more ESOP challenges. If you don't have a long-range plan, let me explain to you what a long-range plan means to me. When you put a long-range plan, it goes out 15 years. And you'll sit there and go, what do you mean 15 years? Well, 15 years, if you put a projection out there 15 years, it's really amazing how you get perspective of why you're there. And I look at you all to go back and look at the company 15 years ago, and what was the size of the company and how many employees, and where is it today? I can name I had an argument with the mother CEO of a company, and I was trying to groom the successor, and I made him go out to an industry group and says, you're a $10 million company. Go out and see if you can find a company, one of your distant competitors in another market. See if you can find somebody who went from 10 million to 100 million in 15 years. And he came back with 5 companies. And I asked him, so tell me, what did you like about, would you do it again? And if you were to do it, what would you do differently? And what were some of the key milestones that you needed to make to get there? And it was really interesting how those companies said things differently. When he came back, his mother says, "Are you nuts? Why did you make him? He now wants to be a $100 million company. We're just a small little $10 million company." And he says, "Well, wait a minute. What were you 15, 20 years ago? How big of a company?" "Oh, we were about $1 million." I go, "Well, that's what he has to do." And so part of the dynamic is if you go through that journey of a long-range plan and have this vision, starting with numbers, if any of you are CFOs, I'd ask you to take the sales and multiply by a 3% increase in 15 years. And then every 5 years, acquire a company a third your size. So if you're a $10 million company, acquire a $3 million company. And still grow at 3 to 5%. And see what you get for growth rates. And it's really fascinating to see how you could grow a company through mergers acquisition. And what usually happens, once you get through the first acquisition, you want to do 2 more or 3 more. And that's when you start getting your ramp up in values. And see, by the way, go do stock value on that. One of the tough parts on low accountability, low morale, low growth, one of the challenges you have as a board is that, or what a board can help do, is change the tone of the organization. Because chances are, low growth, low morale, and low accountability have been faced by many a director in their own business. And so one of the challenges you have is by having an independent director is there can be some engagement within the management team to try to change the mindset and try to solve problems that they are. By the way, low accountability, low morale, and low growth are the results of something else. And so that is what I call an end result. And no matter how hard you try to tell people to show up and be happy and grow sales 50%, and you must be accountable, something else has to change in order for those things to improve. And it starts with helping management understand their role and responsibility. I don't know if any of you have any family dynamics in your organizations, but they do exist in a number of ESOPs. And I'm working with a family business right now where the son doesn't believe in ESOPs. And he doesn't believe in them at all, has no interest in it. Mom is saying, yeah, we're keeping it because this is the way my husband and I wanted this. And so part of the challenge is that, those dynamics, they're family issues. And they show up in the office. And it does impede management effectiveness. So sometimes an independent director can help break that problem, and it's helpful to have somebody that's independent do that. I believe the next one is the biggest challenge for ESOP companies. No successor groomed for founder or CEO is what I believe to be the biggest challenge, because a number of ESOPs are disappearing because the founder has not found or has been able to get a replacement for themselves. They've not done a good job. Okay? And so along the way, there are a number of things that have to be done to do that. And there's a process to do that. Boards have a great way of helping getting those started. Somebody has some radio going on. Can you mute that? Oh, okay, anyways.
A little bit of feedback.
Well, I'm hearing something about portable vacuum cleaners. I don't know where that's coming from. Okay. Anyway, so industry and market conditions are difficult. The challenge we all have right now is that the growth rates that we had prior to 90 and prior to 07, we're probably not going to see for a long time. The next 4 years are going to be growth rates that are not going to be, for some industries, are not going to be there. But for others, it's going to be outrageously good. One of the challenges you have, that why people are out there acquiring other companies, is because they can't grow themselves anymore. They have to acquire. So one of the challenges you have is you got to be able to do that. And so one of the things an outside board member can help you with is, how do you improve the company's performance by different ways?
Jack?
Yeah.
If that's bothering you, I can mute everyone, and then that should silence that.
Okay.
All right, let me do that.
You hear it?
The conference has been muted.
hold for.
Okay, Jack, you should be unmuted. Is that a little better?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay, go ahead.
It was distracting me. It was just like glaring in my ear.
Okay.
Sorry. A key manager or CEO suddenly leaves or becomes disabled. That happens a lot. It's really amazing the number of companies that I've had to deal with where the CEO suddenly dies and the families, it's still a company, but the family's now in mourning. The management team is in mourning. All the companies and relationships that were dealing with the CEO are in jeopardy. One of the biggest things that happens in the death of a CEO is that all these personal guarantees have triggers that in change of ownership, now what? So the loans get called, and now what happens? So I'm just, those are things that happen. It's very important that with an independent board, banks have a tendency to listen to listen to the board as they make their way through this transition without the personal guarantor. Sometimes it requires the mom or the wife or the spouse to keep the business alive by signing the personal guarantee or continue the signing of the personal guarantees till the debt gets paid off. So there's a number of those kinds of things that can happen. Well, let's see, what's the next one? Where is the next one? Okay, good. Well, I wanted to have time for you guys to answer any questions you may have. There's one other thing that I didn't put on the slide that I thought would be helpful to you, and that is if you haven't got a board and you're trying to become a board, I would like to talk to you about how that is done. There's a number of ways to do it. First of all, somebody has to sit down with the owner and do it. Sometimes that doing that as an employee there's a higher level of risk to do that because it's why do you think I need to do that? If you've got an engaged guy who maybe sending him to a seminar like this would be a way to go, or her to go to something like this. Or sometimes it takes somebody from an outside to come in. I'm flying into a company in the Midwest because the owner does not have a board other than his internal managers, but he's in his 70s. He's not willing to let go. He still runs the company, but he's ill, and he's not listening to his management team. So they're hoping that somebody like me can come in and say, well, here's what we do. This is why we're doing it. Why aren't you doing that? And here's a number of guys that have done this. Why aren't you doing that? And it saves their, they're actually doing it. They're happy because they've been trying to talk to the guy, and he won't listen, and they're hoping this will do it. So there's that stage. Then there's the other part where, and by the way, when I meet with this gentleman, I'm going to meet with him with his wife. Because I'm the one that's going to sit there and ask, well, geez, Bob, when you pass away, who owns the stock? The ESOP? You're not 100% ESOP. Okay, so who owns the stock? Your wife. Oh, so Mary, are you ready to run the company now? And that leads to, honey, you better get this fixed. Then there's no better motivation than the spouse saying, you better get this fixed. So if that's something, you might look at people like that. But usually it could be a best buddy too. A golfing buddy or somebody who shows up at an association meeting or something like that where you can get the buddy to do it, or a girlfriend. And the key is to have a plan. And the plan is to say, look, we just want to have one or maybe two independent people to come in. And don't be a director, be an advisor so that you can get used to it. And if you don't like them, it didn't cost you anything. You didn't have to do a vote. You didn't have to do D&O. You didn't have to do this and that. It becomes, okay, that makes it easy. And then from when you get to the point that maybe you can't stand Jack Veale. So no, we're not going to invite you, Jack. I'm so sorry. Goodbye. And that's okay. But then you invite Mary in, and they like Mary. So Mary gets in, and she's on the board. That's how you could do it. I would push to get them to understand, get them motivated, and then advance it with a solution that says, here are some candidates that are independent, and one of my most successful boards that I ever formed, because I do form a lot of boards or reconstitute a board, is the one that this company was flat sales in the 90s, early 90s, during the bad recession of the 90s. They almost went under, and I came in just after they got out, got through it, and they've been flat sales for 5 years at about $20 million. And when I was done getting the board together, the board consisted of, and it was an advisory board, and the board itself was made out of all the sons and daughters of the CEO and the nephew. And so the advisory board consisted of an industry best buddy, somebody who's out of the state, out of the region, in the same industry. We had their CPA, who was well trusted. We had myself as the consultant, who was coming in to work with the family on their systems. And then we had this independent person who was recommended by the bank because he was a well-known person and he sits on a lot of boards. And between the four, and so we went through an orientation process, and the orientation process is fairly simple. You got to build a board book. The board book consists of all the legal documentation. For example, in an ESOP, you want to have the plan in the book. You want to have projections and long-range plan. You want to have their key initiatives and minutes for the last for the last couple of years, and and there's a number of other things you put in there just to inform the director of what is going on in the company. Sample products and services and some key initiatives. And then there's you have to sign confidentiality agreements and all that kind of stuff. And so then I'm on board, and we go through an orientation, going through a walk through the facility, meeting the key managers. And still, this is an advisory board. This is not a full board where D&O insurance and all that stuff is being done. This is just getting them through. And then you go through that process, and you have to have regular meetings. That's the key. And one of the ways, if you want to accelerate the process, is do monthly board meetings. They almost become like operating meetings, but they're really not, because what's happening is you're trying to advance the advisors up to speed as fast as you can. So, like, for example, I would have a board meeting today, or this month. I'd have a board meeting next month, and a board meeting in December for a vote in January for the candidate or candidates you want to have in. And one of the things that you do is you take the board. For example, Jack, we're only taking one right now, so we're taking Mary first. I hope you're not insulted. We still are interested in you. But right now, this is we're just going to start with Mary to get used to it. I'd say no problem. Do you still want me to come to meetings? Absolutely. I want you to come every quarter. We just needed to get you all up to speed. We're going to do Mary, and then it'll either be you and Bill on the next one, and that's how we go. Okay, fine. And so now what we want to do is we want to stage them in, Jack, because we just don't want to bring in and vote we want to stage it in. And so we may bring in another person to replace Mary on the advisory board until such time we're ready to take on the next person. Now, at some point, by the way, you got to pay me, when I show up for these meetings as an advisor. Whether I'm a board member or an advisor, you should pay me. The difference is that when you talk to a board member, you're going to pay them for a premium of taking risk with you, because they become a fiduciary. They have liability, so you're going to have to pay them more than you would pay me if I just showed up for a meeting and no liability. Okay? And so then when you get through that process, then you now have these directors or advisors or directors that are in your pool for making it work. I'm going to stop here because it's 10:45, and I want to make sure that you have time for questions if you have any.
A lot of information there, Jack. I have a couple issues, or a couple questions. I want to loop back to the board selection process.
Yeah.
At some point, every board will change, whether it's through attrition or the desire of the company to expand the board, which may be common.
Yeah.
Or perhaps an ineffective board member needs to be replaced. What do you see as the most common methods for selecting a board and an effective process for doing that replacement?
Well, it requires somebody to sit down with me and say to me, "Hey, Jack, we're making a change, and I was asked to talk to you about how we can do this smoothly. And we were looking to bring in Mary, and that's or if you don't say it's Mary, it's going to be somebody. And and I think it's time. The one thing to do is to have a process in place that you can do that with.
Right.
If you don't have that process in place, build it in. One of the things that can come out of it is that it's a matter of I would not do it abruptly. I would do 2 or 3 board meetings of advising, saying to me, "Hey, Jack, we're really thinking of changing the board, and want to know if you have an interest in stepping down. And if not, then we will have to talk about it on an off time." But that's how you do it. You don't just abruptly do it. There's a process that you got to go through. Did I answer it well?
And what about the criteria that most boards or top management uses for selecting those board members? Do you see that that they're well prepared in terms of identifying the criteria for those people? So, setting the bar high enough, so to speak?
Well, that's called board composition. In the governance lingo, that's board composition. And board composition, a lot of times people think it should be an industry, there should be your CPA, your trusted advisors, and the engaged boards, they tend to be out of the box type people. When you look at the publicly held banks, you can see that General Electric is on a bank board. You can see that Apple Computer is on a board. They're not in the same industry. They're outside the box.
Right.
So part of the thing is you want to get the outside stuff, not the inside stuff. The management should already have. They should be trying to get out of the box type things, because that's where the value, shareholder value, really comes out. Is why aren't we doing it this way? Now, one industry guy or gal in the board is helpful because it keeps the management honest. But the real value is when you get the out of the box people who may not. If you're a car dealer, having 5 people that are car dealers on your board is not going to help you, because you're really looking for the outside guy or gal to help.
A good mix.
Yeah.
Of experience.
And another thing that's kind of interesting that I've seen too is the need for people with ESOP experience to be on ESOP boards.
Right.
Because there's a family board is not the same as an ESOP board. Yeah, they both may have their stock in trust. They both have trustees. The trustees may be, in the case of a family, would be mom and dad and the kids. In the case of or a bank. In the case of a ESOP, you have an internal trustee or an independent trustee, and they're the shareholders. And their view of things are going to be different from a family, because a family may want to keep it in the family, where the ESOP is required by ERISA to keep, for the beneficiaries of all, it may be best to sell the company. So there's a whole dynamic of what's best for the company. If you were offered 10 times what your house is worth, would you sell it? That's a tough question. Mm-hmm. When it's been owned by the family for 20 years or 50 or 100 years, and versus one in which nobody's really stayed in the house for very long.
Yeah, that board-trustee relationship is absolutely critical.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
And I didn't cover that there because this was more about board evolution.
Right.
Any questions from anybody?
Speaking of ESOP experience, it's not only ESOP experience, but it would be how can I put it? Support, if you will, understanding of the employee ownership concept. I would think that in many cases that might be important if the intent of the board is for sustainability of the ESOP itself?
Well, one of the challenges is the word sustainability is one in which a company that is worth more being sold than being held is the dilemma of everything right now. It comes in waves, and right now sustainability, the sustainability issue in 2007 and 2008 was about survivability of the company. For those that made it that far, now you've got private equity and other companies with a lot of cash sitting there going, we need to acquire to grow because we can't grow with the market conditions as they are right now. We want to be ready with heft. When the market comes back, we will be in a much better position. So they're strategically looking at themselves and with their long-range plan saying, you know, we still have to be a $100 million company. This is probably a good time to buy companies and get the heft so that when the market gets from the 3% to 5%, we're really going to kick butt. So that's what's going on in the market right now. So a lot of ESOP companies are disappearing because of that. What are the boards doing? The boards are sitting there saying, I can't help it. We need to take this. We got to take this offer.
Right. What about the mix between inside and outside board members? Board members that are currently employees vis-a-vis board members that are outside of that company.
Well,
what kind of mix are you seeing?
Well, it's all over the map. It's all over the map. You're not going to get Jack Veale, owner of a company who has worked for years, to give up control that easily. So to make that transition to work is not going to be smooth or easy unless I'm willing to accept the change that goes with selling to an ESOP. Adding a board gives management an ability to evolve without the CEO. And I would push it that in the event of he or she gets hit by the bus, that you had a board that didn't include them, included one or two that didn't include them, would help them as well as anybody else, I think is probably a great approach.
Right. Okay, we're drawing near to the hour that we've allocated, and for the last few minutes, I'm going to open up the lines again. Hopefully we don't have the background noise, but I've jotted down a few questions here. Let me just ask those in attendance some of these questions, and maybe they have comments. Do we have any companies that are listening that are looking currently to expand their board or to change their board? Do any of the companies have pass-through voting for their board? I know probably a minimum number of ESOPs do have pass-through voting. Do you have current board openings as we speak? And are you having problems with the process that you use to select new board members, and would you like to discuss that a little bit? So let me open up the lines here.
The conference has been unmuted.
If anyone has any questions, just fire away. Jack, any closing words of wisdom?
Well, take a look at our sites. We have esopdirectors.com. We're developing esopb2b.com. ESOP marketplaces for companies that are looking to become ESOPs. And we're trying to build out so that we can help business owners who become ESOPs and do it in a smooth and careful way. So that's the intent of all that. And I'm thanking you all for attending the program. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me or call me.
Please do so. You see Jack's contact information. If you have any other questions, feel free to contact Jack directly or contact us at the OEOC. Aware that later in the month we will have another webinar in our series and that's on Tuesday the 23rd. Check our website for registration instructions for that one. Else? Other questions? Thank you for attending, and have a good day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys and gals.
Thank you. Please stand by.